And let me tell you, her English missive that she sent me didn't sound like it would be something she was capable of. However, Kal Korff has been known to write people and threaten people under various pseudonyms. And being the cowardly little shit that he is, very, very seldom when he's called out on these outrageous claims, threats, and everything else, will he come back face to face. But he does have an MO of contacting people's jobs, threatening to get them fired, contacting people's families and harassing them. And you're going to hear about some of that from some of my guests tonight. So, with that being said, I basically told him, well, you know what, Korff? Maybe you did work at LLL, Lawrence Livermore Labs, but quite frankly, who gives a damn? The bottom line is, this is a tempest in a teapot. What is your problem? Well, his problem, from my standpoint, is quite frankly this. The man is a megalomaniacal, desperately attention-seeking person that is looking in his empty life for something to fulfill it. And he fulfills it through fantasy and these make-believe organizations that you might expect out of an 8 or a 10-year-old child, but not a man fast approaching 50 years of age. Now, our next guest that we're going to have on is going to be retired Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Randle, Ph.D., and Randle is going to fill us in from his standpoint what actually happened. Now, look, since this is a very special show tonight, we are not going to have our normal format, but what we are going to do is quickly take a break to tell you just exactly who we are, and then back to the show. So stick around.
The global perspective is the thing that really gives you the understanding of how the planet works.
Email, Facebook,
cyberstationusa.com.
All right, we are back, and I have Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Randle, Ph.D., with me. But before we go to Colonel Randle, I mentioned at the beginning of this broadcast that Korff attempted to get my guest, Richard Dolan, in order to embarrass me. I don't believe I told you what it was, but he wanted Dolan to ask me why I condoned torture. Now, to show what a sneaky and backbiting, and I might add cowardly fellow Korff is, he had every opportunity to inquire of me himself. If he wasn't gutless, he may not have been able to telephone me, but he certainly could have sent me an email. And, ladies and gentlemen, I would have read it. Now, what he was referring to was some time ago when I stated publicly on Facebook that I did not consider waterboarding to be torture. Now, let me just throw a couple of names at you to give you an idea of the type of people that we are involved in this so-called war on terror. Do you remember the names of Daniel Pearl or Nick Berg? These were both a couple of innocent civilians that were taken by these Islamo-fascist murderers, and they literally had their heads cut off with knife blades. And Daniel Pearl was murdered by one of the original architects of the September 11th, 2001 attacks in the United States. Somebody that we captured and somebody that was waterboarded a number of times in order to get him to give up information. Now, let me just very quickly throw this at you. You're standing there in front of one of these killers that you've captured, and these killers have imminent knowledge of a terror attack that is about to happen. Imagine if your wife or your husband or your children or your mother or father or brother and sister were in the target zone, and this son of a bitch won't talk. Now, it's one thing if you start slicing and dicing them with a knife. That truly is torture. And I'm sorry to say I've seen the aftermath of torture when I was in the former Republic of Vietnam, as conducted by the communists. Pouring water in their face, although unpleasant as hell, is not torture. When I went through training, I was waterboarded. And I got to tell you, I didn't like it a damn bit. And I'll also admit that it wasn't nearly as long as they got this guy waterboarded. But this guy eventually gave up information that saved lives. If that makes me a son of a bitch, so be it. But I've been to war. I've seen the aftermath of what killers can do, and they were protecting your life and mine. And and Colonel Randle can tell you more about that if we have time. But here he is, Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Randle. Kevin, it's great to have you back on this episode of Dark Matters Radio, but I got to tell you, the subject tonight is not nearly as pleasant. Welcome to DMR.
Well, thank you. If I may make one slight correction to you, is Lieutenant Colonel retired?
Retired. Well, everybody knows you're retired. Christ, Kevin, your hair is gray. I mean, we know that.
I'm like 900 years old.
Well, look, I ask you and a number of other people to come on here tonight to address this, quite frankly, in my opinion, this loose cannon maniac running around trying to make people's lives miserable. Let's start off. Where did you first encounter this individual?
I believe the first time I ever saw him was in a debate in Seattle, Washington in the 1990s. And I had been out in California doing a television program on UFOs and got a call from a station in Seattle wanting me to be on their program, and they would fly me up there. And it was sort of an ambush. I didn't know that Korff was going to be on it. I didn't know anything about it. I just agreed to do it and was sat down in the studio with that. And every time I started to make some kind of a point, the host would cut me off and go to Cal Korff. That's the first time I ever laid eyes on him, and I think it may be the only time that I was ever in the same room with him. So it was back at that time, and we were arguing the legitimacy of the Roswell UFO crash.
Okay, now, he has since written quite frankly, and even the reviewers have admitted this, a cut-and-paste job on Roswell, where he went and took large sections of text from other publications. I guess in a way that would make him a plagiarist too, wouldn't it?
I would think so, yes.
And did a cut-and-paste job. But you know what I found rather amazing? Now, this is one of the things that anybody that's dealt with the public, like I have as a law enforcement officer, or that you have as an investigator, is that this man apparently is filled with rage, filled with hostility toward anybody that has the temerity to call him out on some of this stuff. Now, I noticed up on YouTube, he's done at least 22 quote-unquote exposés on the scandals of Kevin Randle. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've actually looked at a couple of them. They're actually quite boring, even though it's about me, and I'm all about me, but they're fairly boring, and they're, of course, loaded with inaccuracies.
Well, to give the the audience just a very, very brief thing about what we're talking about. Let's go to one of the ones that that Korff did on Lieutenant Colonel retired Randle.
Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Scandals of Kevin Randle. This is episode number 21. Folks, as I keep saying, what we do is we just go through the writings of Kevin Randle concerning the mythical Roswell UFO crash of 1947, and we try to determine whether Randle's telling the truth or not. That's always important to know that. So here we have his book, Truth about the Roswell UFO crash, about the UFO crash at Roswell, and again we just go through it and find out if it's true. And I remind again everybody that Royce Myers III claims that Kevin Randle is credible. In fact, he thinks so highly of Kevin Randle he even has him enshrined in his UFO Hall of Fame. So you can ask Royce why he never bothered to check Major Randle's work, or if that's he did check it and he agrees, then why would he agree with a fraud and a guy that lies about Roswell? I don't know. You can ask Royce. Let's turn to page 219 now in the afterword, where Kevin Randle is trying to give you a sob story about how cruelly he's been treated by other UFO researchers who don't quite buy everything he writes. In other words, I'm not the only one. I'm just one of many people who think that Randle mixes it as if it's no big deal. And this is something that even Stanton Friedman has pointed out. And Stanton Friedman, by the way, is in Royce Myers' UFO Hall of Fame as well. I was in there until Royce started to disagree with me and all of a sudden said I wasn't credible.
Incidentally, I think that thing about the UFO Watchdog Hall of Fame, Hall of Shame, must eat at him, Kevin, must eat at him, that once upon a time, Royce Myers had enshrined Korff in his Hall of Fame and then removed him. Do you get the fact that that is gnawing at this man?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he mentions it at every opportunity he has about how bad the Hall of Fame is, and Royce Myers doesn't do this. And it's just one guy's opinion. Royce Myers had a website that had the stuff on it, and I don't think Royce Myers has done anything with it in like 4 or 5 years. And yet we keep getting Cal Korff complaining about Royce Myers' UFO Hall of Fame. It's absolutely ludicrous.
Now, I wonder what an actual psychiatrist and or psychologist would have to say about this guy. He is, even me, a layman, although I've had a lot of street experience dealing with disturbed people. Even me, as a layman, would have to suggest that this guy is a narcissist to the nth degree, and he simply can't understand why the world doesn't take him as seriously and enshrine him as he himself does.
Absolutely. He promotes himself. He is the CEO of his organizations. He says he's a colonel in the Israeli-founded special secret services, which exists only in his own mind. And I thought that Rob McConnell, who at one time had Korff on his program frequently, described this organization the best way possible. And McConnell says on the air, well, it was kind of like Uncle. You remember the old man from Uncle show? A fictional organization to describe a fictional organization. Korff, of course, denied that it was like that at all, but anybody with half a brain realized what was going on.
Well, you know, I wrote a kind of an open letter some time ago, and I titled it "Stolen Valor." And when I do my ultimate paper on this entire brouhaha, I'm going to include that letter. But you know, I told him at the time, Korff, that is, that after I got him to admit that this was not any officially sanctioned organization, it was simply private, I told him, I said, well, you know, Korff, the only private organization that I'm aware of that has military rank is the Salvation Army. It's not by chance part of the Salvation Army.